my whole life. All I wanted.
I'm afraid we found your son at a polka party.
Is to make up new words to a song that already exists.
Hi there, and welcome to Baseball by Design. I am SportsLogos.net minor league baseball correspondent Paul Caputo, broadcasting live, as always, from the Sunday Helmet Hall of Fame in my basement in Fort Collins, Colorado. Hey, before we get started, I have a very special guest and a very special announcement here from Curved Brim Media, my good friend, co-founder of Curved Brim Media, and the host of the Dad Hat Chronicles, one Ed Rivera. Ed, hello.
Hello, Paul Caputo, as we are recording live.
Yeah, broadcasting live.
Broadcasting live with my air quotes.
Hey, listen, we need to present a unified front here because we have big Curved Brim Media news. You and I co-founded this here Curved Brim Media just under 3 years ago. So it is, we have been, talking about this for a while. And one of the things that we said to one another, one of the big problems that we anticipated was, what are we going to do with all of that podcasting money? I think that was our biggest problem. And so, Ed, I'm gonna let you maybe break the news here for everybody.
Well, I'm glad that you brought me in to discuss this, because this is something that, like you said, we've been working on this, and I think this is very exciting.
Yep.
The both of us have decided that we are going to put our money together and purchase a collegiate summer baseball team. I think it's great.
It is. It's quite an investment, and it's something we've sort of been talking about. How do we advance this whole Curved Brim Media project to the next level? Some of our fellow podcasters have signed on as investors with us. We'll have more news about that as time goes on. But in the meantime, there are different models that you can follow with this. You don't necessarily have to sign on with a specific league. You can sort of schedule as many games as you need to.
We can go independent. It's totally okay.
We can be independent. I think probably the most we can reveal right now is that it will be in North Carolina.
Correct.
North Carolina is the, I would say, minor league baseball mecca. I mean, it is 100%. Absolutely. So many teams there, a lot of collegiate summer level teams, a lot of opportunities for a team. So I think we can leave it there for now. Like, I would say it's fair to say we have 3 finalists for cities right now, but we don't want to name them.
Yep. Nope, it will stay in the bank. We're just going to hold on to it until, we decide to release everything.
One of the things that has made this financially feasible is the fact that my good friend, Dan Simon, has signed on to help us with branding. And so to have, someone like Dan in your back pocket who is just an expert at this, so accomplished in this field, to help us, and look, you're wearing his Toledo Mud Hens logo right now at this very moment. It's
a great logo.
Yeah, that's really exciting. So anyway, I think that's what we can say for now. But
stay tuned.
In the meantime, I have a really fun episode with one Ben Hill, and you have another episode with Ben Hill coming up at some point. So
shut the front door. You have Ben Hill?
Can you believe that?
Oh my
Ben
Lord.
Hill. We're just getting into the minor league baseball season here now. The season is just kicking off. So I have Ben Hill. We're going to talk about some of the new brands coming up in minor league baseball. So that'll be fun. But in the meantime, Ed, thank you so much. This was fun. People will get to hear some developments down the road.
So excited.
All right, now let's go talk to Ben. Right now, I am so thrilled to have someone who I have been following for many, many years as a fan of minor league baseball, the Benjamin Hill of minor league baseball. Ben Hill, good morning. Hello, how are you doing? Go Birds.
Go Birds. Was that just last month? Yeah, the Birds won the Super Bowl.
Just over a month ago. It's incredible. Ben, you're a fellow Philadelphia sports fan, so I feel like I can share that Go Birds moment with you right there. You were even talking about it on the Minor League Baseball podcast. By way of introduction, I don't know how to introduce you, Ben, except to say that you are the guy who covers the culture of minor league baseball. You're on the Minor League Baseball podcast, the show before the show, with, of course, Sam Dykstra and Tyler Maun and Josh Jackson. And you travel the country covering minor league baseball. Every minor league baseball fan knows who you are. I subscribe to your newsletter, The Baseball Traveler. So is it fair to say that you are the guy who covers the culture of minor league baseball?
Yeah, that is fair to say. I don't ever come across like, yeah, I'm the guy, but it's a unique job and something I've been doing for many years now, and I don't think anyone's ever really had this job precisely to cover the business and culture of minor league baseball. It was never my plan specifically, but as in life, you know what life can bring, in that you don't know what life can bring, and this is what life brought me. That sounds very passive. This is what I wanted to bring to life. That's what it is.
This is what you have wrought, and I think there are a number of people who look at the work that you do and think, man, what a life. But it's hard work. You're out there on the road. You've visited literally hundreds of minor league baseball stadiums. It was a big deal when you got to all 159 of the affiliated minor league ball clubs. Now, of course, or the 160 teams, 159 ballparks. And then, now it's 120 teams, 119 ballparks, and you'll have some new ones to get to this year in 2025, which is why I have asked you to come on. We have had an absolute influx of rebrands. And, one of the things that you do on the Minor League Baseball podcast is you cover the new brands that come out. You cover the really fun promotional nights, and as I said, you get into the culture of the game, and it's Tyler and Sam, I think, get more into the prospect rankings and the players coming up through the systems and the farm systems for all of the major league teams. But your area of interest is my area of interest when it comes to minor league baseball, is the nicknames, the promotions, the community. So we've had, by my count, and correct me if I'm wrong here, we've had 8 new permanent rebrands. We've had the Corpus Christi Hooks, the Oklahoma City Comets, the Lake County Captains did a sort of throwback to a brand that, one of their early brands. The Tennessee Smokies are now the Knoxville Smokies once again. The brand new Columbus Clingstones, the Chesapeake Bay Sox, formerly the Bowie Bay Sox, the Hub City Spartanburgers, who are sort of a revival of a brand from another franchise, and then the Salt Lake Bees have rebranded. Am I missing any permanent rebrands?
That sounds correct to me. I just wrote my more or less annual, rebrand roundup story, which I should have pulled up before we got into this call, because that's a good article for me to refer to. But that sounds like everything. And when I wrote that story, just here's rounding up all the rebrands, I didn't put in Lake County just because I forgot.
Oh.
And I felt bad about that and then added it. And apologies to the Lake County Captains.
Well, there's, I could see how you might miss that one, because it's a sort of a reprisal of an earlier version of their logo for sure. So, and this is not to count any of the rebrands from like the partner leagues. I mean, there's been all sorts of rebrands there, and it does not count also an absolute flood of alternate brands. And I don't want to talk about those specifically because we have enough on our plate already with these, and we're not going to necessarily dig into all 8 of these. There's a few that I want to ask you about, but do you have a sense of where or why we have all of these alternate brands? Like I've been writing about these brands for sportslogos.net for about a decade, not as long as you have been working for minor league baseball, which is 2 decades, right? You've been there for 20 years now?
I mean, yeah, started part-time just writing game recaps in 2005, and this niche evolved from there. Been doing it full-time since 2010. So yeah, there's different ways to answer that question, but a long time.
Have you ever, in all of your years writing about minor league baseball, have you ever seen as many alternate brands as we've had in just the last few weeks?
I like a lot of things with this job. I wish I had a running spreadsheet to compare and contrast easily. If this is not the most, it's pretty close to it. But obviously, for a number of years now, this has been a big part of promo schedule rollout season, and that like alternate identities are sort of the crown jewel. for most teams when they get out their 2025 or their promos for the next season, whatever that season may be. But it has been, absolutely an influx. The Fresno Tacos or Fresno Grizzlies releasing their latest iteration of tacos, gave me a little bit of a chance to reflect on that because they were the first, food alternate identity, and that was 10 years ago. And if you recall, which I'm sure you do, when the Fresno Grizzlies said, we're going to play a game as the Tacos, that was like huge at the time. It was like went viral nationwide, like quirky sports news story. It was like, wow, this team's actually doing this. They're not just like having a taco related promotion, they're changing their name to the Tacos. And so, that kicked off a lot of it. But the Grizzlies, in the press release said they are like just flat out the quote OG alternate identity.
Yeah.
And I don't think that is true. I definitely think they started it with the regional food front. I think they helped kickstart the larger trend, but teams were occasionally doing that before 2015 in terms of just having a different identity for certain nights of the year. But that's something on my huge checklist of things I may or may not get to is try to really say like what is the first alternate identity and that where a team wore a uniform, representing a team name that's not their day-to-day identity.
Yeah, right. Like, because I remember in 2015, the Baseball Palooza road trip took us to the Portland Sea Dogs, and it was Star Wars night. And I was, to be frank, I was a little disappointed because I think the Portland Sea Dogs have kind of a classic identity, and I was looking forward to seeing that. And instead, they were wearing like their R2D2 uniforms. And to date, it's the only time I've ever seen the Portland Sea Dogs play. But they were still the Portland Sea Dogs. They just were wearing the R2D2 uniforms. So I would be really, really curious to see a research project. Not that you don't have enough on your plate, but to see a research project that really dug up what was the very first alternate identity, a team saying we're just going to completely change our name and our brand for a day or a weekend or a week or whatever. So now you've got me thinking about that too, Ben.
Yeah, and you're an expert as well. Start looking into that because I do think something that was going on as an industry trend before the regional food related alternate identities was the, what could have been night promotions.
Yeah.
When teams would release like a bunch of finalists for what their name should be when they're in the midst of rebranding, then they would use those finalists that weren't chosen for like what could have been nights. And those definitely predate 2015. Found one incidentally, or was talking to a coworker who reminded me of the Lakewood Pine Barrens. They did that before the tacos. They played on what could have been night as the Pine Barrens. Of course, I remember the Bowling Green Cave Shrimp going back to like 2009 or 10, but I can't remember if they actually wore Cave Shrimp uniforms for that. So,
Right.
yes, minor league baseball is a world of, not literal rabbit holes unless the groundskeeper has his hands full, but a lot of rabbit holes out there to explore.
Well, and we haven't always had a Ben Hill to be documenting it for us, right? Like, so it is, I imagine it would be hard to research because minor league baseball has been around for more than 100 years, and these teams have had all sorts of different names and sometimes formal, sometimes not. And so, yeah, I imagine that would be a really sort of pinning Jello to a wall kind of project to research the early
Yeah,
rebrands.
so much is in minor league baseball. I mean, the first year of MILB.com, which was then minorleaguebaseball.com, was 2005. And, to this day, we kind of have to put things on social media or write articles when a player does something impressive, be like, wow, that's the most strikeout game since at least 2005, as if 2005 was like 1894. But like, we just have, it's really hard in minor league baseball to definitively track down stats prior to the establishment of an overarching website for the entirety of minor league baseball. So there's a lot to explore. And yeah, as I've done this for a long time, I've been beginning to think that my work is like actually of value to like historians. I mean, I don't want to sound arrogant, and for so many years I just wanted to do something and run away from it because you never want to look at your own work. But now that I've been doing this long enough, I'm like, hey man, however you feel about yourself on any given day, this is like the only documentation of so many different things. I need a preservation project. I need archivists, whatever.
Yeah.
Get in touch.
A designated archivist to go along with your designated eaters who you have at the ball games.
Yeah, yeah.
One of the things that I find, whenever there's a rebrand, I will, try to research the previous brand. one bit of information that I never, ever, ever found prior to you writing about these brands is who created the logos, who designed the logos. And I appreciate in your articles that and even on the podcast, you feature the work of the designers that you've talked to, the Dan Simons of the world, and when a brand is created by Brandiose, you call that out in the article. I actually wish the teams would do a better job of that. Sometimes they'll release a whole new brand that's created by a talented graphic designer, and I have to contact the team and say, hey, who did this? Who created this brand? And so I'd love to see the teams feature the designers more, so that, made my job easier to say, here's who created this brand. So I appreciate the work that you all do. And you've even had you've had Dan Simon on the podcast. Have you guys had Jason and or Casey from Brandiose on?
Totally bizarre that I don't think we ever have in so many years of the podcast, and I haven't talked to those guys for a little while, but yeah, through my career, I could have crossed paths with Jason Klein, Casey White from Brandiose, and they have been such an influence in minor league baseball, especially with the trend toward more and more goofy, crazy, absurd names. Had a major role, and so through my entire career, Studio Simon and Brandiose, who originally Plan B branding, have been the two heavy hitters. But I think especially in recent years, we've started to see teams using more local firms and some other designers, rising up as well. It seems like a little bit more of a diverse landscape in terms of who teams are going with than it did, maybe 8-10 years ago, when it was just basically like, oh, that's a Studio Simon, oh, that's Brandiose.
Right. Yeah, you certainly have a lot more. There's a lot more designers out there too. The Ryan Fooses of the world and the Sky Dillons, and so there's a lot of other folks who are out there doing this work as well. Speaking of the work, though, the reason I asked you to come on is I wanted to talk about some of these new brands that are coming up. The ones, and you can tell me if there are others that you really want to jump into here. The ones that jump out to me, just because they're entirely new names and entirely new brands, the Columbus Clingstones, who were, of course, the Mississippi Braves. They moved to Georgia from Mississippi. And the Oklahoma City Comets, who were the Oklahoma City Ball Club, who were the Oklahoma City Dodgers, who were the Oklahoma City Redhawks, who were the Oklahoma City 89ers. Did I miss anything there at the Oklahoma
No,
City?
you got it. I think that goes from 1962 to present day.
Let's start with the Columbus Clingstones, fun new brand. A city gets a ball club back again. This is a Dan Simon brand, and this is one that people were sad about Mississippi, Pearl, Mississippi losing its team. And then I think, especially when you lose a team named for its parent club, people are going to be naturally suspicious of, the new brand that comes in. This one I think was well received, and people really enjoyed it. This character is a lot of fun. Is there anything about this brand that surprised you, caught you off guard? Anything that you were sort of expecting that did not happen with this? And that I realize that's a whole separate question from the other one I'm about to ask. For you as a person who covers minor league baseball culture, do you have an opinion on the parent club name versus a unique name to a local community? I just asked you two entirely different questions, and so...
Yeah. Well, to tackle that last one first, on the whole, I find myself not that opinionated in general a lot of the times, because I'm covering so much and sort of absorbing so much that sometimes it seems weird. I kind of forget to have an opinion, because I'm just kind of like, okay, this is what's happening, and I just want to sort of learn about it and get something out there. And then usually it's like in retrospect that I'm like, oh yeah, that one's really nice, or like, I don't know, this isn't my favorite. But as a writer, doing what I do, I don't editorialize too often. I have a little space maybe in the newsletter or on the podcast, but for the most part, I'm just trying to get as much information out there to people. Obviously, though, in terms of the parent club versus unique name debate, if it is even a debate, I mean, of course, I've always been on the side of a unique identity. One, just for someone who covers this world, it's just more interesting when you have unique identities and as opposed to a landscape of just parent club names. And I think that means a lot for minor league baseball as an industry when you're just talking about it writ large to point to all these unique identities, because in the vast majority of cases, they tell you something about the community itself. And that between primary names and alternate identities, I say this all the time, you just learn so much about America through these names. And I just feel like I'm an encyclopedia now of like regional American facts all through minor league baseball. So, and because of that, in a lot of ways, I look at what I do as not as much sports writing as just about writing about American culture, which is one of my favorite things. I've always loved baseball, so to write about American culture through the lens of baseball is kind of ideal, which is why I've been doing this so long, because I think the core of this niche is so interesting. So, not to ramble further, but yeah, it's just more interesting to have the Columbus Clingstones instead of the Columbus Braves. And it's now, if it ever was a real debate, it certainly isn't now, because there aren't too many left that carry the name of the parent club, because I think most minor league teams, and just from a strictly business perspective, baseball, it speaks to how important baseball is, but a lot of time fans get mad, oh, this is just a cash grab, a money grab, and all this, and that's always a funny point to me, because it's like, a for-profit business that needs to make money to survive
Right.
is doing a cash grab. Well, that's one way to put it.
Right, right, exactly. That's funny. Yeah, that's the point that you make about learning about the culture of America and the nature and the geography, the landscape, the wildlife, all of that. It's been such a wild thing for me, writing, it's a similar experience for me. The one that I always point to is the fact that I learned somewhere along the way, and it stuck in my brain, that Binghamton, New York, is the carousel capital of the world. And it's like, how would I have known that without the Binghamton Rumble Ponies and, covering minor league baseball for not for a living, but for me as a hobby, for you as a living. But this Clingstones, one of the things I learned about was, first of all, Georgia is not the top producer of peaches in the country. It's, that's California, but Georgia's the peach state. I I guess intuitively maybe it made sense to me, but the difference between a freestone and a clingstone was a new distinction to me. Was that new to you?
Yeah, it was. I mean, obviously, Georgia, the peach state, you associate Georgia and peaches. Of course, I knew that, but I never really thought about varieties of peaches and what their names were. So I did learn about a clingstone versus a freestone. A clingstone is called a clingstone because the flesh, the fruit itself, clings to the pit. And so it's kind of a cool name in that they didn't just go with Columbus peaches, they went with a special variety of peach. I mean, I usually do this. Like I monitor local reactions a little bit on Facebook and social media in general. And a lot of people were saying like, we don't even make that many peaches, and like, why are we still like clinging to this, as it were? So I can get it maybe from a local perspective, like this tired trope, like we're not really that much about peaches, but also it's obviously just a quick identifier for Georgia itself, and for cities like Columbus, to still associate with the peach and have a regional identity, and obviously a peach, there's unique things about it. There's peach in the color scheme, which as far as I know is a unique thing to use peach and as part of a primary uniform color scheme. And a peach obviously lends itself to the stereotypical family friendly minor league mascot and branding and identity, a fuzzy friendly peach. So that works too. And yeah, I think it has been pretty well received, and I wouldn't really foresee any major uprisings in Columbus, Georgia about the name. And this always happens. Once fans get to the ballpark, they usually, if they had been negative, they're usually not negative much longer. And I get it, but like if your only association with minor league baseball was something decades ago, or perhaps not at all, the branding can seem off-putting and bizarre. But then when you see it incorporated into a larger day-to-day experience, then it all makes sense. And that's an industry cliche at this point.
Well, it's amazing how quickly something like the Rubber Ducks just becomes almost like a classic after not that many years. You made a very slight little pun where you talked about, clinging to a brand. And it reminds me that your writing is very funny. Like you clearly work hard at incorporating puns, and the language is clearly important to you, and in particular puns. Not to mention the fact that the word penultimate now is completely associated with Ben Hill. Like that's the Ben Hill word for sure. Just this is completely off topic for talking about logos, but the writing itself that you do about these logos, uh, how how hard do you work at incorporating puns, and do the sort of fun jokey tone that you take sometimes writing about when it's appropriate for these brands, how focused on that are you, how hard do you work on that, or does it come easy to you? Could you not see writing without that?
Yeah, I mean, both things. I mean, I work hard on it, but it also comes easy, if that makes if that makes sense. I mean, I've been doing this long enough that yes, a lot of it does come easy, and I can rely on my prior knowledge. And I've made so many puns and jokes and little references and allusions that at this point, I'm kind of repeating myself. I often feel like I'm kind of inadvertently cannibalizing my own work, even if I don't realize it half the time. So a lot of these kind of jokes and like ways to phrase things are already kind of baked in because I've been doing it so long. But going back to the very start of kind of discovering this niche, it really kicked off once I started writing a weekly promo column way back in 2006. And at the time, I was in a sketch comedy group and, pursuing comedy as hard as I was pursuing, well, anything. I was just trying to get a foothold in life. And so finding a mode of baseball writing that allowed jokes was just like wonderful to me. And so in those early days, every like 100 word description of a promo, like I kind of had to have jokes in it. I had to have a good closing line, even on a 100 word blurb. And these days, I'm not as like obsessive about it. I'll write what I need to write, and I'm like, "Ooh, that works," or "Ooh, that's a nice little joke," or "Ooh, that's a nice little closer to like tie into what I wrote at the beginning." But at the same time, it doesn't necessarily need it. I just have enough confidence that I can do it more often than not, just as a result of many, many, many repetitions. And I appreciate that people appreciate the puns. As I get older, I was never ashamed of it, but now I just embrace it. And, I have many pet peeves, but one is like when people make a joke, especially like on Twitter, or at least how Twitter used to be, they make a joke and they're like, I'll see myself out.
Uh-huh.
And I'm like, why? You made
Yeah.
a joke, stay there, own
Right.
your joke.
Right.
You
Right.
can't like
Right.
make a joke and have it both ways.
Yeah.
Like you make a joke, stand there and own it. I'll
Yeah.
see myself out. Good. Then I don't want you here if you can't stand by your jokes. Get out of here.
Well, the fact that you were interested in comedy writing sort of speaks to you and I have a shared affinity not only for Philadelphia sports teams but for Weird Al Yankovic. And I know that
Of course.
you saw Weird Al live. I have never seen Weird Al live, but I did just get tickets to see him live at Red Rocks in Colorado, which seems a little incongruous, but that'll be a first for me to get to see him live.
Yeah, I've seen him a handful of times, and I have tickets for the same tour this summer at Madison Square Garden. I
Oh, another
mean,
iconic location.
it's amazing. Like, obviously, Weird Al's been a name for
Yeah.
literally our entire lives, but for so many years he would play decent venues, but like, by New York City standards, if he was in New York City, maybe something like the Beacon Theater.
Yeah.
Now it's like Madison Square Garden. And the bizarre thing about that, not to go on a Weird Al tangent, is that he hasn't released an album or a parody in over 10 years.
Mm.
It's like he did now this past decade has just been like his body of work being so strong and him still being just active in the landscape that he gets bigger and bigger without releasing anything new. I mean, yes, he's done movies, he's been
Yeah.
on different TV shows. It's not like he's retired or anything. But I find that paradox of Weird Al to be really interesting. And as a longtime fan, I'm a little bit down on him because he doesn't owe me or you or anyone anything. But I also feel like, come on, Al, like, wouldn't it be great just to wake up one morning and there was a Weird Al parody? Like, just come
I
on.
think that would require me to have to learn about contemporary music, though, and I'm such a knucklehead when it comes to the new music that is out there. That it's
Well, me too. But like
we-
in the early days of Weird Al, I
yeah,
learned the Weird Al parodies first,
right.
and now you get older and you do the same thing. Like, oh, you hear the parody first and then understand the song. But
Yeah.
so I say Weird Al, make music again. Put out an album. The fans would
Well,
like it. Anyway, I should stop rambling about Weird Al.
Well, I know that Weird Al is an avid listener of the Baseball by Design podcast, so it's I'm sure he'll hear this. He'll get that message from both of us. Um, the Oklahoma to get us back on track here, the Oklahoma City Comets. This one was a surprise, right? Like this was we don't associate Oklahoma City with the aeronautics industry in any way, and it's funny to me, and I think folks know the story that the Commerce Comet was Mickey Mantle, and that's Commerce, Oklahoma, and so the Comet's nickname is an homage to Mickey Mantle, a Yankees superstar. This brand was launched during the World Series. I think it was even Game 5 when the Dodgers closed out the Yankees in the World Series. There was a lot of sort of like funny stuff happening with this brand. Does that make a brand harder to cover for you when it takes a lot of explaining? Like I feel like this brand took a certain amount of explaining.
Yeah, I think a little bit tougher because you have to put it in the context of they were the Dodgers for the better part of a decade. They are still a Dodgers affiliate, but now they are under a different ownership group, so they're moving away from Dodgers name while still being an affiliate. And in the meantime, there was a 1 year interval where they were just called Baseball Club because they went down the road in the rebranding and, not to get into all that, but, various ideas and approvals and this and that. The timeline is as long as it's ever been in the industry. And they ran into some bumps in the road. So played a year as just the baseball club. So then once it all finally comes together, their parent club, who they're no longer named after, is in the World Series. And they're just like da 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 for the Comets. And then you're kind of like Comets. Because I remember before I talked to the team, but when I heard what the name was going to be, I started Googling like Oklahoma City Comet,
Yeah.
looking for like, is there some moment in history where like, I don't know, a comet was very visible in Oklahoma City and it was a big event in the city, or is there like a space and aerospace aviation history around there? And there is some, I was told it's emerging, but it's more just this general, almost like just because sort of outer space theme, just because space is optimism and new frontiers. So I was a little taken aback by that aspect that most minor league team names have a much stronger, like, bam, here's why. But I do like the overall branding. Dan Simon did the branding. I like the colors and the Commerce Comic connection is, I think, pretty cool that, Mickey Mantle is the greatest ball player to ever come out of the state of Oklahoma. And, if you go to that ballpark in Oklahoma City, he's honored all over the place. There's a big statue in front of the ballpark. One of the streets surrounding the stadium is Mickey Mantle Drive, so that makes sense. But it also leads into a bit of an awkwardness. I mean, especially with this particular timing, the Dodgers were playing the Yankees in the World Series, while the Dodgers' top farm team is announcing that their name is in part an homage to a Yankees player. It was kind of a lot to unpack, as they say. But I think the Mickey Mantle connection is a very cool aspect of that, and the team, yeah, and it all looks good. But yeah, I kind of had to process some unexpected elements of it, and that there wasn't as strong a prior connection of Oklahoma City and Comets.
It was I love the little comet guy though, the little astronaut character. Dan was talking about it and he said how that was sort of an afterthought and it was a last minute addition to the brand, and I think it's one of the most popular elements of it. So it's I like that brand, but it was one that I felt like took a lot of explaining for sure. All right, Ben, I do this all the time. I've kept you way longer than I meant to. I do have one more question, sort of at large, about these brands. The majority of the new brands that have come out, I'm looking at the Hooks and the Smokies, the Salt Lake Bees for sure, Chesapeake Bay Sox maybe fall into this category, but brands that are similar to what they were previously. Certainly the names didn't change, although I guess Knoxville and Chesapeake changed their geographic signifier. But overall, the brand still feels the same, and they've made, subtle to significant changes. How much does that matter to the average fan. It obviously matters a lot to us, right? Like the Bay Sox, they made really significant changes to their brand. The Smokies, they made sort of subtle changes to the Bear, but they changed from Knoxville or from Tennessee to Knoxville. The Salt Lake Bees, they still have their bee character, but they introduced some alternates. We make a big deal out of that, and it's a lot of fun to write about and talk about and cover. In your experience, how does that change the sort of fan experience at the game? How much does the average Salt Lake Bees fan care that they've got some new tertiary marks there?
Yeah, I mean, I think it affects the fan in proportion to what the actual change is. I mean, we use the term rebrand kind of just to mean changes in general, but this is a conversation I've had a lot of time, and we've never come up with any sort of like agreed upon glossary of like really what these things are. We say, oh, they tweaked, they refreshed. They technically a rebrand is when you flat out you're one thing and you change everything. You change the entire name. Often that's because of a relocation, but sometimes you see a rebrand in market. So yeah, we do have some indistinct terminology for this, and so I do think it affects the fans in proportion to what the extent of the changes are. Salt Lake, pretty minor changes. Yeah, there's going to be some fans who like see some new hats, some new alternate logos, and they're like, "Oh, I like that. I want that." But they're not going to be thinking of the bees in any profoundly different way because there's some tweaks to their look. That's a name that goes back, well, in Salt Lake history over 100 years based on their, earlier iterations within the Pacific Coast League. And that, as we often see with changes, no matter how big or small they are, is, they're going to a new ballpark. So that's what the fans are thinking about is like what the new ballpark is. And so the team changed the look a little bit just because they wanted to have for them the best possible suite of logo options going into a new ballpark. So it's very much a time that makes sense to refresh. But I think that's going to be obviously secondary on the fans' mind to just like, what is this new place? But the team wanted to incorporate, you think about all the places you put a logo in a new ballpark, especially a large AAA ballpark with a lot of money and investment behind it. You don't want to necessarily just keep going with everything that you've been doing for the last 10 years, 15 years, however long it is. It just makes sense to change, but that's not going to affect the fans very much. But if it's a team, a city like, that has not had minor league baseball for quite some time, Spartanburg or Columbus, then the average fan, they're going to care a lot because even if they think, I might only go to 1 or 2 games a year, they're like, this is new in our city. This is what represents us. And so pretty much everyone's going to have an opinion in that case.
Well, this is something that I think I could talk about for several more hours. This is there's an awful lot to unpack here with branding in minor league baseball, and I think, Ben, we may just have to sit down with a ice cream helmet, maybe a helmet with some water ice in it at a Threshers game, maybe, or something like that. We've got to find a way to just hang out and have this conversation because there's so much to unpack here. I know you're super busy, so I really appreciate you taking the time to talk not only with me for the Baseball by Design podcast. I know that you have already, at the time of this recording, spoken with Ed and Val, the Stadium Food Girl, for the Dad Hat Chronicles podcast. I think this episode may come out before that one does. So, but they have already spoken to you for their podcast. So we here at Curve Brim Media appreciate all the time that you have spent with us. We are just getting ready to launch the 2025 minor league baseball season at the time of this recording. As a preview for the season, I'm going to drop this right around the beginning of the baseball season. So we're just getting going on the 2025 season at the time that you are listening to this episode. Unless, do you find, Ben, with your podcast that you have people who listen to it, years after the fact, and you'll get an email about, hey, in 2022 you said this, and I disagree, or is it people listening pretty much right when it drops?
I think the majority are listening right when it drops or soon after, but definitely we've encountered people who found it along the way and then went back and dove into the archives. We actually had a woman on our show, I think an episode that you were maybe part of as well, where we kind of highlighted, listeners and fans. Trying to remember her name. I think it was Luz, Luz.
Loose, okay.
Luz. It was a woman who found our podcast through whatever means and went back to literally episode 1. And over who knows how long, listened to every single podcast until she got caught up. So we appreciate that dedication. We certainly don't expect it. We're grateful to everyone who listens and look at it like a lot of the things that we do around here is something that you build up incrementally. We're always going to be in a bit of a niche being minor league, no matter what the specific focus is. I think business and culture is almost a niche within a niche. So you don't necessarily look at some, little things can go viral, little things can capture everyone's attention. But in terms of an audience, this is for the long haul. So it's just little by little building up as much as we can. And often to me, it feels like no one cares, no one's listening. And then, then people tell me how much they like it. And I'm like, I'm the greatest of all time. And I'm just always, whiplash between these extremes. And you'd think I'd learn how to be a little more even keel. It's tough out there.
You guys do such a good job of acknowledging the fans. I feel like you're mentioning my friend Johnny Bolin a fair amount. He's always writing
Of
into you
course.
guys. One of my very first interactions with you all was when I had discovered the podcast and I was helping a friend move cross country, and we were driving cross country, and I had listened to like 10 straight episodes. And I emailed and I said, hey, just, hey, I found this, and where have you been all my life? And Tyler actually read the email on the air, or at least referenced the email on the air. And then of course last year when you were talking about my 24 for 24 ice cream helmet challenge, that was a thrill for me as well. And I know that, Ed and Val were super excited to get the chance to talk to you. So certainly the way you all support the fans who support minor league baseball is much appreciated. Ben, I'm going to let you get out of here. Where can people find you, your newsletter, the podcast, social media? Where would you like people to go find you?
Yeah, all over the place. I mean, I had a blog for many years, the Ben's Biz blog, which you can still check out because there's a ton in the archives. But, that has led to my social media handles of, Ben's Biz on Twitter or X, the Ben's Biz on Instagram, the Show Before the Show podcast on MILB.com, and subscribe to my newsletter, The Baseball Traveler. I wish I had a handy link, but on a podcast, that's tough to do. But, Google the Baseball Traveler newsletter, Benjamin Hill, you'll find something. Or email me, like you said with the fans, like benjamin.hill@mlb.com. Like you said, we try to be in touch with everybody, and everyone who emails me after reading the newsletter or whatever, I try to reply to everybody because, again, like you said, this is a niche, and we're thankful for every fan we have, and the only way to build is to maintain these relationships. So it means a lot to us.
Yeah, well, you guys are very responsive to emails and on social media and all that, so it's a ton of fun. And you spent way more time with me this morning than I had asked for, so I appreciate that. We took some diversions, and you bore with me while I had some tech issues, so I appreciate that. Ben, I look forward to following you some more on the podcast. Look forward to chatting again, and keep up the great work that you do. And thanks from all the minor league baseball fans out there for everything that you do. Really appreciate it.
Hey, thank you. Thanks for having me. And maybe after all these years, we'll actually cross paths in an actual ballpark one of these
Every
days.
year I check your travel plans to see. The closest we got was you were out here for, I think it was it the Sky Sox back then, or did you come out here for a Vibes game in Colorado
No, it was
Springs?
Sky Sox. It was
Yeah,
actually the last Sky Sox games ever in 2018.
that's as close as we've come to meeting. I was going to try to get down there, and it didn't pan out. But we'll find a way to catch a game together.
One of these days.
All right, everyone, welcome back. It is time for Studio Simon Stumpers, in which my very good friend Dan Simon brings us a trivia question related to usually the team at hand. But this week, we've been talking with Ben Hill of Minor League Baseball, so there's lots of teams at play. We're talking about new brands. We're getting ready for the 2025 baseball season, which at the time of this episode dropping is underway. But Dan, the big news for us here at Curve Brim Media, Ed Rivera and I discussed at the beginning of the episode that Curve Brim Media is in the process of pooling our resources to purchase a collegiate summer level baseball team. And part of this whole ordeal, part of what's making it possible, is that you, an accomplished designer and friend of the podcast, have agreed to help us with coming up with a name and coming up with a brand. And we appreciate that. And this is going to be a very exciting adventure for Curve Brim Media. So we can't get too far into the details right now, but thank you for your willingness to be involved with this. I would describe it as an ambitious project.
Ambitious indeed. I'm looking forward to when your signatures are on the contract and this becomes official and we can get started.
Well, like I said, we wouldn't be able to do it without your expertise. So thank you for that. Now we're gonna move on. We've got this interesting episode. We had a great time talking with Ben Hill. And normally I don't even try to guess. I'll throw out some ideas what you might be talking about. There's no possible way I could guess where you might go with a studio assignment stumper. So while you have done, 100 and I don't know, maybe 10, 110, 100 and around there, I have never once tried to actually research in advance of a stumper. And this one in particular, I wouldn't have had any idea where to start.
That's very smart of you. Researching in advance would be a fool's undertaking.
It's for suckers.
Yeah. So let's see what we are going to talk about here. So, of the 8 new official team identities for 2025, by the way, when I say official team identities, as opposed to alternate identities, Copa identities, well, those two things, these are, the official team identities. 3 of them were done here at Studio Simon, the Columbus Clingstones, Hub City Spartanburgers, and Oklahoma City Comets.
May I make a comment on that, Dan?
Comment away.
Last week we talked about how many alternate identities there have been, and there have been a ton of them. And Ben and I talked about that a little bit. But I noticed that you mentioned those 3 brands created by Studio Simon, that the Columbus Clingstones and the Oklahoma City Comets, of the new brands for the 8 affiliated teams, those 2 were the only ones, so far as I could tell, that were not something we had ever seen before. They were new brands, new names, and in one case, a new city for those brands. The other ones, it felt like, with like the Lake County Captains and the Salt Lake Bees and the Knoxville Smokies, they were sort of versions of brands that we had already seen before, or updates to existing brands that, that the casual fan might not be overwhelmed by. So you are responsible, Dan, for the biggest shakeups on the minor league baseball landscape.
Yeah, included in your list of teams that were existing brands, you're including the Hub City Spartanburgers. Now, for those who don't know, I would imagine there's a lot of people out there who, if you don't live in Spartanburg, you may not know. You might have thought that was a brand new name, but there had previously been, I believe, for just one season, not all that long ago, just several years ago. It could even be in the 2020s, if not, it was the late 2000 teens. There was a collegiate summer league team in Spartanburg simply called the Spartanburgers. That was it. No geographic what would you call it? Geographic
signifier, maybe? I always use geographic signifier.
Okay, no geographic signifier. And so this team, this affiliated team, has no connection to that collegiate summer league team other than getting that team's former owner's blessing to revive the name. As a matter of fact, the owner was kind of tickled that they would bring it back. So that was fortunate because the powers that be wanted the name to be Spartanburgers, and they got the thumbs up on that. So
I'm glad that you brought that up. Because Ben Hill and I did not have the opportunity to cover that name. And yeah, you're right. It was, it is a minor league, an affiliated minor league team with an entirely new brand. And that's we didn't get to talk about that one, so I'm glad that you brought it up. My enduring memory of that brand being unveiled is that it dropped on a day when you and I were in a car with Ranger Amy and Anna DiTomaso as part of our Anna Dana Palooza road trip that we participate in every year. That was last year. And so I got my quotes for the sportslogos.net article that I wrote about that team from you while we were in a car between minor league baseball games as part of our road trip last year. So that is a one that I'll always associate with our road trip.
Yeah, it was a good way to kill some time on the road. So back to our stumper.
Yeah.
Uh, so I mentioned those three teams for which I created their brand identities for the 2025 season. And then there were another three that were updates that I did not do, but that had previously been Studio Simon identities. And those three are the Corpus Christi Hooks, the Knoxville, formerly Tennessee Smokies, and the Lake County Captains. And our Studio Simon stumper today asks which of those three teams had gone the longest with its previous brand identity before this 2025 rebrand, or more accurately, perhaps brand update. Was it A, the Corpus Christi Hooks, B, the Knoxville Smokies, or C, the Lake County Captains?
Wow, that's a good question. When you first asked that, I thought, oh, of course, it's, and then the end of that sentence did not pop into my head. Dan, I'm going to say not the Lake County Captains because I feel like they have had a number of different brands over the years. Now, it's possible those brands could have lasted a long time, but I feel like the Corpus Christi Hooks and the Tennessee Smokies were both around for roughly 20 years. Like that's what's in my head is that those brands were both pretty close to one another time-wise. I love the story too that Reed Ryan drew little hooks characters on a napkin, and that was the foundation. That was a fun episode that we did about the Corpus Christi Hooks. That story of Reed Ryan drawing a little hook character on a napkin. So these are all within obviously the time frame of your career. I feel like the Hooks will edge out the Smokies and that both of those teams will beat the Captains by several years. So I'm going to go Hooks. Final answer, Dan.
Your final answer is correct,
I thought you had
but
fooled me.
but your the rest of that was surprisingly, I don't want to say incorrect, but okay. The Hooks identity was from their inaugural season, which was 2005.
Okay.
So that's
20 years, like I said.
sort of by far the oldest of these, because the next oldest is actually the Lake County Captains. That's from 2011.
Okay.
So that was 6 years after the Hooks. And then the Smokies, which to me, I sometimes say when we're talking about these stumpers that I didn't, a couple of recent stumpers, I said I didn't even have to research this because I knew this from personal experience. But I did the Knoxville Smokies identity. And when I looked in my files to see what year they were from, I was surprised to see that it was 2015, just 10 years ago.
Wow.
Because to me, it feels like it's been around much longer than that.
Yeah.
But that's actually, well, I was going to say a fairly recent one. It's at least the most recent one, just 10 years ago.
Well,
And it should be noted that the brand update that was done retained the bear that I did, which I was really glad to see because I really think that's about as good of a bear as I could do. I've done a number of bears, but I don't want to say anything. I really like all the bears I've done, but this one I just thought was kind of timeless. And other changes were made. They changed he's got a bat on his shoulder in the primary logo, and they changed the bat. They changed the background, they changed the type, but they kept the bear. So I was glad to see that he lives on.
The bear is intact. You pointed out in a previous episode that you have created bear logos, different bear logos for 4 different Cubs affiliates, which I thought was a fun fact.
Yeah, that's it. You know what? You do this long enough, and there's going to be some redundancy. In that case, the redundancy was bears, but I've done multiple insects. Spoiler alert, or not spoiler alert. What is it when I can't tell you who it is, what team it's for, but I am currently, as we speak, working on an insect themed identity.
Oh. I don't know if there's a name for that, except for just like you're just vague booking me, I guess. It's you're by the way, I feel like you were a little hyperbolic in expressing just how wrong I was, just because I was off by a few years with that Smokies brand. Sort of made me feel like a fool there unnecessarily.
No, I didn't say that. Well, whatever.
You said, I can't believe how wrong you were on a question that you got right, or something like that.
You all that matters is you got it right. So
chalk one up in the win column for this guy. Dan, what fun. Thank you again for all of your help with our exciting project and for bringing us a Studio Simon stumper every single week on the Baseball by Design podcast. I said it last week. I'll say it again this week. Happy baseball season to you.
And happy baseball season right back at you. I will see you next stump day.
See you next week.
Oh, hey, everybody. Just really quick. One more thing before we get out of here. You suckers. April Fools.